All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, in the aftermath of the Milwaukee Bucks conquering of the Phoenix Suns in the 2021 NBA Finals, there are a bevy of things that they're going to have to deal with, especially going into next season. One of those things being the concept of overinflation, basically meaning their egos are going to have to be checked, because there are going to be various members of the mainstream sports media who decide that they're going to jump on top of the Milwaukee Bucks bandwagon, especially in the immediate aftermath of their victory in the finals, and claim them to be something that they're not. The Milwaukee Bucks, of course, like most other championship teams, are going to be divvied up into one or two categories, at least pertaining to how they're assessed, especially down the line when people are able to evaluate what they were able to accomplish with a greater deal of proper context and scope. Either this championship in 2021 was the beginning of a dynasty. Now, there are different types of sports quote-unquote dynasties. You have the 49ers or the Chicago Bulls type dynasty where they win championships back-to-back or even three in a row, like the Bulls did in the 90s or the Lakers did in the early 2000s. Or you have what I call a Dirk Nowitzki style championship, where a superstar player is able to lead a team that really is not necessarily championship caliber per se over the duration of years, but for that one season, they're able to concoct enough affinity, enough synergy within their squad to make a championship run, but they have to get it done in that season. Like the 2019 Raptors, they had to win the championship that year. The 2011 Mavericks had to win the championship that year. The 2021 Bucks, in my view, they had to win the championship. And of course, I'm not necessarily assessing them from an esoteric perspective in this video. That's going to be for the main channel. But the coming together of the Sun and the great Buck, or the great quote-unquote deer, the great heart, the horn god, that once again was meant to be a manifestation of who this society's quote-unquote deity actually is behind the curtain. But that's neither here nor there. Once again, I'll be assessing that in a three-dimensional series on the main channel. But just getting back to the point of this video, there are going to be many people who are going to jump on the Milwaukee Bucks bandwagon, on the Giannis Antetokounmpo bandwagon, and Giannis deserves it. He's an all-time great player already. I don't think that we've ever seen a player quite like him, with the frame that he has, but what he brings to the table. He's a power player with a skilled player's body. Like I've said before, he reminds me of a combination of Kevin Garnett and Shaquille O'Neal. So we've never, in my view, seen a player quite like him before. But the question that's going to be broached over the course of this segment is whether or not the Milwaukee Bucks big three, quote-unquote big three, of Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jrue Holiday, and Khris Middleton are the best big three in the Eastern Conference, or is it the Brooklyn Nets big three of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden? Now, of course, we know what the answer is, but for the sake of the segment, for the sake of debate, for the sake of disputation, a couple of the members of the panel are going to try to make the case for the Milwaukee Bucks, and they're going to attempt to substantiate it based on health. So, of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Are fresh off of winning their first NBA title in 50 years. A lot of their success was because of their top stars.
Let me say this. If Giannis is able to win a championship back-to-back, he definitely jettisons himself into consideration for top 15 player of all time. And there will be those who try to make an argument for him being a top 10 player of all time. I will not do that myself. But if he's able to win a back-to-back championship, say if the Milwaukee Bucks win the championship again next year, particularly if all the other teams in the league are healthy throughout the playoffs, there will be many who will try to make the argument that he's a top 10 player of all time. If he's able to win a championship next year and the LeBron, Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis, quote-unquote super team is healthy, say Kawhi comes back in time for the playoffs and is fully healthy, the Brooklyn Nets don't suffer any injury setbacks, and Giannis is still able to win another championship, he definitely becomes a top 20 player, arguably a top 15 player, no doubt about it, especially with a lot of the other accolades that he's been able to accumulate thus far.
The NBA's top big threes and the Bucks combo of Giannis, Khris Middleton, and Jrue Holiday came in second behind the Nets. KD, Harden.
Now look at James Harden. Who the fuck told this guy that he can dress? showing up to the game looking like a goddamn chef. Like, what's going on here, man?
Joined now by Fox NBA analyst Slick Rick the Bucher, but Acho, which big three would you rather have, the Nets or the Bucks?
The Brooklyn Nets. And I don't think that it's particularly close. Of course, people are going to argue right now. They're going to estimate the Milwaukee Bucks based on their concept of recency bias, of overinflation, and therefore they're going to grant more value to the Bucks than they actually deserve. And there's nothing against them. Great achievement. Very fun finals to watch. But the reason why the finals this year was so compelling is because, in my view, on both sides, in both conferences, the team that made it to the finals was not the best team in the conference. To me, the best matchup would have been the Brooklyn Nets versus the LA Clippers. In my view, both teams had the most talent. They had the best rosters, and they had two of the 5 superstars in the NBA. Now, the Milwaukee Bucks also have a superstar in Giannis. There's no doubt about that. He is a superstar. But I think that the Nets versus the Clippers would have made for an even greater matchup. But once again, the reason why Milwaukee and Phoenix was a great matchup is because they're both on the same level. They're both a second-tier team in the NBA.
There have the Bucks big three. Now, let me clarify this. I would rather have the Bucks 3 best players. The Bucks do not have a big three, and we're not going to start acting like the Bucks have a big three now to undermine what Giannis has accomplished.
Please keep in mind that Emmanuel Acho is Nigerian, so he's been on his pro-Nigerian tip for the last month or so in regards to Giannis Antetokounmpo, and that's all well and good. Now, there was a little back and forth that he had with Stephen Jackson a while ago. Stephen Jackson made an epic ass of himself over the course of the playoffs by trying to demean, denigrate, and marginalize the impact that Giannis has had on his team, even going so far as calling Chris Middleton the quote-unquote real Batman or the real superstar on that team and not Giannis. What were the reasons for that? Who knows? Maybe he was just trying to give a hot take that would get some attention for himself. Kendrick Perkins, the resident idiot on ESPN, also jumped on board with that take. So maybe they were confederate in that quote-unquote hot take and trying to get attention for themselves. But it never made any sense whatsoever. Giannis is a legitimate superstar. Do I consider the combination of Giannis, Jrue Holiday, and Chris Middleton a big three? Well, they have to be considered a big three because they won a championship. I just don't think that it's a superstar big three. The Toronto Raptors had a big three back in 2019 with Kawhi, Kyle Lowry, and Pascal Siakam. The San Antonio Spurs, they had a big three with Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker. They were just not a superstar big three.
And Chris Middleton's growth over the last several years, and all of a sudden to propel Jrue Holiday into a figure that he is not when he is one of the greatest overachievers that we have seen as of late.
Well, I'm not going to call Jrue Holiday an overachiever. What I would say about Jrue Holiday is that he's been one of the more underrated players in the NBA amongst the mainstream media. But for people who actually know basketball, Jrue Holiday is, by most estimations, a top 25 player in the NBA. Whenever they take the poll of the most underrated player in the NBA, Jrue Holiday always wins out amongst the players. So that to me is a sign of the great respect and great regard that Jrue Holiday has amongst his peers. Now, when you compare the Milwaukee Bucks big three to the Brooklyn Nets big three, the Brooklyn Nets legitimately have 3 of the top 15 players in the NBA. And fully healthy, you can make the case that James Harden is a top 5 player. I would not make that case, especially not with the way that Giannis has been able to solidify himself as a superstar. But one can make the case that fully healthy, James Harden is in the argument for a top 5 player. James Harden right now, with Giannis having won the championship, is probably the most elite level bubble superstar in the NBA.
To act like the Bucks have a big three and retroactively change the narrative of what they accomplished and how incredible it was. But for the sake of this conversation, I would still rather have the Bucks 3 best players than the Nets 3 best players because...
No, you wouldn't. You're just talking Emmanuel Acho, but I understand why you're saying that. You're concocting an argument to side with Giannis Antetokounmpo. It's understandable.
everything into consideration. If you all were to tell me in a utopian society, in this perfect world where injuries weren't a thing, where Kyrie wasn't distracted when he was called the N-word by a black player, where Kevin Durant was not always on social media or injured, where James Harden was always in shape, in this utopian society, sure, I'd take the Nets big three. But if y'all telling me 2021 here on planet Earth, where we actually live, where Kyrie Irving does miss time often, where James Harden is not always in shape, and where Kevin Durant can be swayed at times by his emotions, then...
Well, I have to stop Emmanuel Acho there. Here's the thing with KD. And, you know, because of my stances on various topics, whenever I speak seemingly in support of a certain player, there are people who are contrarians who will try to allege that I'm a quote-unquote supporter of that player. When you support what's factual and what's right, that does not make you a quote-unquote supporter of a person. It makes you a supporter of facts. The fact of the matter is that Kevin Durant, even though he's maligned as someone who is emotionally unstable, his emotional instability has never spilled over onto the basketball floor. He's always been able to show up in the most crucial moments, at least particularly recently, especially since he joined the Golden State Warriors. So he has matured on the basketball floor in that way. Now, most of us understand that in the forming of super teams, the pressure is really on the quote-unquote super team to win the championship in their second season. Even Emmanuel Acho has noted that in the past. I guess that he's forgotten his argument. Right now, the referendum for the Brooklyn Nets starts at the beginning of the 2021-2022 season. If someone were to tell you that the Nets were going to be pieced together last year and feature a superstar player coming back from what is widely considered the most catastrophic injury in professional sports, that being a torn Achilles, he was going to be teamed up with a highly touted but much maligned, out-of-shape bubble superstar in James Harden, as well as a capricious and whimsical wonderkind in Kyrie Irving. How are they going to fit together? And if they fit together, would their synergy be enough to actually win a championship in the NBA? In season one, I would say that they were a success. I would not call it a phenomenal success because they didn't win anything. But the pressure is going to be on the Brooklyn Nets next season. It's also going to be on their coach, Steve Nash, to show that he can actually coach and not just stand there and allow them to play street ball.
Old, reliable Bucks. I'll give you a full screen and I will get off of my microphone and my high horse, please. There have been a little over, I believe, 300 or 400 potential games to have been played amongst all of those players the last two seasons. The Bucks' three best players, Jrue Holiday, Giannis, and Middleton, they play 88% of the time. The Nets' big three, they only play 54% of the time. The last thing I will tell you is this. The Nets' big three played a cumulative, collective, 14 games together this season. The Bucks' three best players played 14 games together in the playoffs en route to winning an NBA championship.
That's a great graph and a great attempt at a point, Emmanuel Acho, but I will say this. Kevin Durant coming back from a torn Achilles, we already knew that he was going to miss his share of games. He did have some hamstring issues over the course of the season, which are expected, particularly when the body is coping to being placed under that level of stress when coming back from an injury where he was not allowed to be that active. Now, Kyrie Irving, he's a whole other issue. Kyrie Irving is definitely a lightning rod. He's a little firecracker, and he's someone who basically is this generation's Dennis Rodman. You never know really what you're going to get from him as far as his approach, but when he's on the floor, he's spectacular. You know, he's another player who, you know, some people claim that I'm allegedly a fan of, but they don't really take into account most of the things that I've said about Kyrie. But I'm going to be addressing the Kyrie Irving, Giannis Antetokounmpo situation in another video so that I can break down exactly why I state what I state pertaining to Giannis obviously sticking his foot under Kyrie Irving, and that's not to besmirch Giannis at all. Once again, Giannis understood that this was his year to win a championship. LeBron was hurt. The Lakers were out early. LeBron is really the only player in the NBA who Giannis is truly intimidated of other than KD. So Giannis understood that once you get Kyrie out of there, it's Kyrie against the whole Milwaukee Bucks team. Like, it's not that difficult to understand, but, you know, people when their brain operates on an emotional level, the first thing that they try to do is deflect and project as opposed to assess the facts and empirical data. But once again, I'll be dealing with that in another video. When it comes to James Harden, he clearly was a malcontent coming into this season, was out of shape. And the copious minutes that were assigned to him by Steve Nash and his former coach, Mike D'Antoni, once he arrived to the Nets, eventually it was going to break him. James Harden, Kyrie, and KD cannot be allowed to play 37, 38 minutes a game anymore. Their minutes are all going to have to be lowered into the low 30s, similar to what Coach Bud has done in Milwaukee. That's the reason why his guys have been able to play so many games, because Coach Bud knows how to monitor their minutes. Giannis Antetokounmpo, his minutes are very similar to the minutes that Stephen Curry was getting back in the mid-2010s with Golden State. 32, 33 minutes per game. That's what Steve Nash is going to have to do for the superstars in Brooklyn if he wants them to last through the playoffs.
Wow. This is either going to be a sweep or it's not going to be a fair fight. But it's only going to be one or the other because, thank you, Emmy. The truth is, there really isn't a big three in either or with either of these teams.
Please keep in mind that Rick Bucher has had an axe to grind with the Brooklyn Nets or against the Brooklyn Nets for this entire season. He claimed that the Nets were not going to be able to play good enough defense to win a championship. He was proven wrong in the brief outing that the Nets had as a complete team in the playoffs. Their defense was never a problem, even after James Harden and Kyrie Irving went down. But he still is trying to, push the point because for whatever reason, he seems to have an issue with the Brooklyn Nets. I'll say this. The Brooklyn Nets do have to win a championship next season. They have to stay healthy and have to win a championship. If not, there are going to be major problems with that team. The coach is probably going to get fired. If Steve Nash does not win a championship next year, he's going to get fired. Now, one thing to watch is the potential trade of Ben Simmons for Damian Lillard of the Portland Trail Blazers. That could change the balance of power in the Eastern Conference as well, especially if Philadelphia does not have to give up too much to get Dame. If they can bring in Dame and, maybe only have to give up Ben Simmons and a couple of first-round draft picks, and they can keep many of their other defensive stalwarts on that team like Thibault, etc., they could be a team that may have the possibility of taking out the Nets, even if the Nets are fully healthy.
Not a big three with the Bucks for all the reasons that Emmy noted, and there's not a big three with the Brooklyn Nets either. It's really a 2+1. Okay, let's be realistic about that. And for the Bucks, I would not call them a big three. I would call them a perfect triangle because you have your point guard and your playmaker, you have your wing player and your scorer, and you have your post player, forward, rim protector, whatever you want to call Giannis. But you have a perfect balance and complement among those three. There's no redundancy as opposed to...
Well, here's the thing with the Milwaukee Bucks team and how they're configured. Giannis is a spectacular leader. So he knows how to, provide support, succor, and impetus to those other two guys and not try to tear away at them. He's very secure in his role. He's no longer competing with Chris Middleton for minutes. He already knows who he is. Chris Middleton knows who he is. And Giannis has also shown, especially down the course of the finals, that he can respond in clutch moments and do the scoring himself. So it's not even like they're Kobe Shaq trying to see who's the better player. Chris Middleton knows that he's not Giannis. So that's why they fit together so well, and that's why I would compare them to the San Antonio Spurs. Main difference is that Giannis is more fun to watch than Tim Duncan. Now, the thing with the Brooklyn Nets, and, Rick Bucher was trying to send shots at Kyrie, and a lot of people are going to try to send shots at Kyrie because they see him as the quote-unquote weak link. And he's going to have to do a lot over the course of this next season to offset or nullify that notion by being more consistent mentally and being available to play. Because if not, he is going to be a problem. I even did a video about this prior to the playoffs. Will Kyrie Irving cost the Nets the championship?
Nets. who have a post player who's never in the post. They have two guys that are scoring point guards, and they don't have anybody who is a lockdown defender at the other end. Meanwhile, with the Bucks, I have two guys who are all-team first defense, and a third guy who was given the responsibility of covering Kevin Durant in that series because he is also an accomplished defensive player.
That sounds like a lot of narrative. Don't get it twisted. Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday are great defensive players, and we know Giannis is arguably an historically great defensive player. But defense is about know-how and want to. And the Nets against the Bucks, or the Bucks against the Nets in their playoff series, they look relatively even defensively, especially in the effort that they were putting in. Kyrie Irving looked great on defense the first 3 games before Giannis hurt him on purpose. And KD is also a very good defensive player, comparable to Giannis when he wants to exert that level of force on the defensive end. So a lot of this is just narratives that this guy's putting out there because for whatever reason he just does not seem to like the Nets, and he does not want to accept that he was wrong about his appraisals. He was very fortunate that the Nets had some injury issues, or he definitely was going to be proven wrong, because they were going to win a championship this year had their guys not went down.
At least twice among defensive win shares has received votes for all defense. So if you're asking me between the two, I could say that the Nets are more talented. There was never a question about the Nets and whether they were talented, but it was a matter of whether they fit. And
you know, once again, just just corroborating the overall theme of overinflation. The way that this guy is talking, you would think that the Milwaukee Bucks had this seamless chemistry all throughout the playoffs. They were one of the most maligned teams throughout the playoffs this playoff season, from Charles Barkley to many other analysts who were talking about how dumb they were and how strange their tactics were. That's why I say that next season is going to be the real test for them. Was this year Giannis's Dirk Nowitzki championship, or was this the start of something special? We're going to have to see some growth from Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton. And to be honest with you, both of those guys are in their early 30s. Are they going to get any better? I mean, how much better are they going to get?
they haven't proved that yet because they haven't played together yet. Meanwhile, the Bucks was never a question about fit. It was a matter of whether they were good enough. And those rings that they're going to put on their fingers next fall are all the proof you need that they are good enough.
Oh, man.
I think the better argument for the Milwaukee Bucks is going to be, now that they've won a championship, they're going to have a championship air about them. But what does that really mean? You understand what I'm saying? Like, the 2012 Mavericks also had a championship air about them, and they didn't even get back to the finals.
I need to see Acho too.
I know. Take a deep breath,
Man,
Marcellus, because you got work to do.
Already.
You got a lot of work to do if I know where you're going.
You already know where I'm going. I'm going where the rest of the world is going. We're taking the Brooklyn Nets. What the hell is wrong with y'all? This is hot takey. This is why I don't like sports media.
Agreed and agreed. Hot takey because they're overinflating the Milwaukee Bucks due to recency bias and fanboyism of Giannis. And Giannis is tremendous. He's one of the 5 superstars in the NBA. But you can't construct your argument based on the presumption of the team with more talent and great chemistry as well, because they did show great chemistry when they were out there on the floor. You can't construct an argument based on them getting hurt. Now, if they get hurt next year, I have to kowtow and say, you know what, it is what it is. But as of right now, I just can't presume that. I'm going to presume that James Harden is going to come into this season in better shape, that Kyrie Irving is going to come into this season in even greater condition than he was last year. And last year I thought that he was in the best condition I've ever seen him in. He had the best season that he's ever had in his career. So we'll see what happens next year.
Here, something that is just so absurd, so crazy that it just makes me want to leave the barbershop. Like, no, he's like, hey, I'm not finished cutting your hair. I'm like, no, I get it done somewhere else. I can't hear this ignorance. And this is...
Well, what the hell did your barber do for you? Put baby oil on top of your scalp, brother? Like, what type of haircut do you need?
And let me just give it to you simply.
What are you doing in a barbershop these days?
Thank you, sir. I mean, come on. He don't have not one follicle left.
This is optional. This ain't by nature. This is
okay.
much.
Bullshit. Keep going, brother.
look this cute. All right, here we go. Number one, I want to go to Acho's Utopia because he's telling me, well, if you tell me that we wouldn't have any injury concerns and N-word concerns, I love you, and they were all in shape, and all I would do is counter by saying, well, I'm just going to take the group that is better, not the sorrier one. The sorrier of these three in terms of talent is obviously the Milwaukee Bucks.
You know, even if I was looking for advantages for Milwaukee, I mean, really the only player that they have on their squad who's comparable to the big three of the Nets is Giannis. I can't even say that the Milwaukee Bucks necessarily have a better coach than the Brooklyn Nets have, because I have not seen that much from Coach Bud to show that he's a great coach. I thought that the best adjustment that he made in the finals was listening to former players who were telling him that you have to make Chris Paul drive left. Like Steven Jackson was saying that. Steven Jackson came out and said that that Coach Bud is not known for his defensive tactics and that he really does not know what he's doing on the defensive end, and that everyone in the NBA knows that you have to make Chris Paul drive to his left because he does not finish well going left. And as soon as Milwaukee made, you know, that transition or that adaptation to the defensive scheme and put Jrue Holiday on Chris Paul, you started to see some differences there.
Because you guys told me that. When you mentioned the big three in Brooklyn, you say KD, Harden, and Kyrie. You notice that? Either it's initials, acronyms, or just one word. Acho Emmy over there knows what I'm talking about. That superstar status. But when you mention the big three in Milwaukee, guess what you say? Giannis, because he's one of them. And then you say Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday. Oh, but that's not even a strong argument. Here's a strong argument. In sickness, health, poverty, and wealth, you got to take the Brooklyn Nets because they were up in a series against your big three 2-0. And it was...
You know what the real turning point in that series was, in my view, though? That whole Jason Williams bullshit when he came out and said that KD told him not to ever compare him to Giannis. I thought that was big going into Game 3. I thought the Nets had a lot of momentum heading into Game 3, and they allowed that story to affect them. And, you know, that should have been something that they ignored, but they allowed that story to affect them, in my view. They put out a very poor effort in Game 3. That dude, Bruce Brown, was allowed to, for whatever reason, take big shots down the stretch of the game. And then Game 4, in a must-win game, Giannis sticks his foot under Kyrie and cements that victory, even though the Bucks were winning in that game. But you never know what happens in the second half. But he sticks his foot under Kyrie. That game was over after that. KD goes out and has one of the greatest performances in playoff history in Game 5. So they won that game, the Brooklyn Nets did. Game 6, Giannis and the Bucks are able to rally. In Game 7, the Nets gave up, you know, pretty much the lead down the stretch of that game, even without Kyrie and James Harden. Without Kyrie and James Harden, it was a competitive series. When you add those guys back fully healthy, I'm sure people are going to say, well, you know, Harden played. He was just hampered. You add a fully healthy James Harden who's able to drive to the basket, get free throws, a Kyrie Irving who's able to cook and occupy Jrue Holiday. Come on, man. That's a 5-game series.
Third of them. It wasn't even all 3 of them. It wasn't even all 2 of them. It was 1 in the third. I don't know what 2/3 of Harden left him, but he was there limping along with KD. Now, let's be real about this. I need to see Acho. I need to see the hair that needs the haircut. It's coming. I know it's coming. Everyone's in that barbershop. I know it's coming. Here we go, guys. We all going to Venice Beach. Hey, Slick, I want you to bring them yellow chucks you wore in the 8th grade. Remember you were talking about that? Okay, we sitting there. It's all 6 of those dudes walking up looking fresh. Got their managers with them, their business managers, their agents, their PR team, all 6 of them. They sit down.
And I know your guys will.
Damn right, they're superstars. So here we go. We're all sitting there, and it's time to draft. First pick is KD. Let's stop playing. Second pick is Harden.
Disagreed. Come on, brother. And I'm on your side, but if we're going to make an argument, we have to make an argument based on reality. The first pick is KD, and that's an arguable pick. One can argue that your first pick could be Giannis. I would take KD, but others might argue Giannis, and they would have a lot of compelling points to make. Second pick is not going to be James Harden. I'm sorry. And I'm not saying that James Harden will not be better in a 3-on-3, you know, on a street court. He might be better. And that might be the reason why you would choose him second. But if we're just going by accolades and accomplishments, the second pick is Giannis.
Third pick It gets quiet. Is it going to be Giannis or is it going to be Kyrie? Depends on what you want. But the point is, even if...
Come on, bro. Let's make realistic arguments. You know, we could win this debate, but you have to make realistic arguments.
And you're drafting with your mindset. Ain't no way that 3 of the first 4 players aren't on the Brooklyn Nets.
I agree with that. That's a fact that 3 of the top 4 players in a draft would be the Brooklyn Nets players. But, you know, come on, let's keep it in the real world.
The big 3 is in Brooklyn. Here is the problem with Sal's logic, Amir.
He used none. That was the problem with his logic. As soon as he said that he would take James Harden over Giannis, especially in the aftermath of what Giannis accomplished, you know, all of the reality went out the window. All of the logic went out the window. James Harden has never had any performance in the playoffs anywhere near what we saw from Giannis in the finals. One can definitely make the case that Giannis had the greatest closeout performance in the finals in the history of the NBA. There's a great argument to be made there.
You already know it, so I ain't got to talk to you. I'm talking to them. Talking talent. Marcellus Wiley wants to ignore the negative traits and attributes and characteristics that make up an individual and only pay attention to the positives. You move to California, the weather is amazing, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that there are earthquakes. You go to Nigeria, the greenery is beautiful, but I'm not going to ignore the fact that there's immense poverty. Teslas run incredibly well, but you can't ignore the fact that they're only supposed to be built once. You get into an accident, there is a big issue with a Tesla. Sure. I'm not going to ignore realities of a situation and only focus on the positives. If I were to only focus on the positives, yes, I would take the Nets. But the problem is, I cannot ignore the earthquakes, the immense poverty, or the fact that they're only meant to be built once. Because the Nets, they miss too much time. So give me the players that are going to be present. Give me the players that are actually going to play. And I'm also not taking James Harden over Giannis, but I won't get distracted by that. I think the viewer can understand that Giannis is a better player. But would you take Harden. 3 Nets over the first 4 picks of 3 Nets, correct? Yes, I will.
Yeah, that's a fact. But that's my point, bro. As soon as you start acting like James Harden and Kyrie, you take them over Giannis, you lose a lot of validity to your argument. So that's why it's important that Acho made that counterpoint, so that at least you can acknowledge that.
4 picks is 3 Nets. That's the best. But they're not present. You know the race. You know the story of the tortoise and the hare. You just want the guy that's going.
Right, but here's my issue with what Acho is saying right now, because he's making some valid points, but you cannot make the tortoise versus hare argument every season in the NBA. There are certain years that are outlier years or anomalous years where a particular team is going to win just because everybody else is hurt, or maybe the superstar of their rival team went down. Those type of things, they just happen. You know, the Houston Rockets, they win a championship in '94, but they have to bring in Clyde Drexler in order to repeat in '95, because the fact of the matter is that in order to win championships, you need 2 superstars for the most part. In '04, the Detroit Pistons are able to defeat the LA Lakers because that team was pretty much done. They reached their end. But they were unable to win any other championships because they didn't have any real superstars. They just had, you know, some great stars, but they didn't have any superstars. So as soon as they face a team with a superstar, maybe a couple of, you know, great stars who stuck together and had, you know, strong chemistry, like the San Antonio Spurs, they lost the next season. Or in '06 when they lost to Dwayne Wade and Shaq. The NBA is a superstar league. So this notion that we can just count on the Nets to get hurt year after year after year, and that's going to lead to the Milwaukee Bucks getting back to the finals and winning it, that's just not something that you can, you know, hang your hat on.
Give me old, reliable, who will be present.
No, 100%. And I hate to go back to something that Acho pointed out at the very beginning, but we're all pretending to be GMs here, right? I mean, that's really the exercise here. Who would we want for our team? And if I'm the GM, do I want the 3 guys who left their last teams under a cloud of controversy and with bad feelings? And
well, it depends on how well they fit together and what you want to do with them. I promise you, if you were the GM of the Charlotte Hornets or of the Indiana Pacers, and all three of those guys call you and say, we want to play together on your franchise, you're going to say, no problem, guys. I'm going to fly private jets out to each one of you so that we can get these contracts signed ASAP. You can sit on TV and act like you don't want 3 superstar level players, or, you know, a high level star in Kyrie Irving, a bubble superstar in James Harden, and a legit superstar in KD on your team. If you're the GM, you could put on that front if you want to in order to try to win this debate, but that's just not realistic.
One whom I don't know when he's going to ghost me. I just know that at some point he is. Or one who...
Some people deserve to get ghosted. You know, a lot of times ghosters ghost people because they just don't want to deal with their bullshit. The theatrics, it's just not necessary. And when life is lived in a very linear fashion, you just come to understand that, you know, some people need to be ghosted. What is the point of this ritual of back and forth argument when it's going to end in the dissolution of the relationship anyway? So let's cut out the small talk. Let's get right to the point. You go your way, I go mine. So ghosting is a part of life.
Diet, or another one who loves Twitter beasts, versus 3 guys who have demonstrated that they are humble, hungry, and no maintenance.
Here we go with the humble false narrative again. You cannot win championships anywhere in life and be quote unquote humble. What do I mean by that? When I say quote unquote humble, I'm talking about being overly self-effacing and actually believing that you're not great. In order to be great, you have to believe that you're great, whether you vocalize it or not. Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's raised well enough to be mannerly, right? Like, what does it mean to have manners? When you pass by an old person, you might say hello, ma'am, or hello, sir. And they might say hello back. And they might have one tooth in their mouth. To have manners is to act like you don't see that they only have one snaggled tooth in their mouth. And you just smile back and go on your way. Now, if you have no manners, you look at them and you say, God damn, what the fuck happened to your jawline, man? You look like a damn unicorn in your mouth. You only got one horn in there. What's up? That's a lack of manners. That's the difference between someone like a Giannis and maybe someone like a KD who's a bit more transparent. And transparency oftentimes is not good. But for some people, it's cathartic for them. So they need that. Believe me, Giannis is a lot cockier and a lot more arrogant than people give him credit for. You cannot be a champion and not believe in yourself to an exorbitant degree. So all this humble bullshit, that's stuff that, you know, a lot of these fanboys have tried to put on Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather's not humble. Manny Pacquiao's humble. Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather are 2 sides of the same coin. That's why they both live how they live. The only difference is that Manny Pacquiao does not take you on tours of his mansions.
All the talk about who we're going to take to the courts and who we're going to play pickup with as far as talent is concerned. Yeah, first of all, the question of whether you would pick Giannis or Kyrie as number 3rd is the tell-all, Marcellus, that you are biased to the nth degree.
Agreed. And I like Marcellus. Marcellus is a smart dude, but I mean, come on, bro. Let's stick to the realm of reality. You know, there are certain conversations that he has where you could tell that he's a bit biased. You know, one of them being the Cam Newton conversation that he has. You know, once again, I get guys who come on my channel, oh, well, you know, you tell us not to be fan, but I could tell you a fan of so-and-so. Bro, everything that I say is based in facts, right? If I say that Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of all time, I can give you analytics to prove that. If you feel like me saying that Steph Curry is the greatest shooter of all time is a sign that I'm a quote-unquote fan of Steph Curry, well, you know, you probably have an issue assessing logic-based conversation, which probably means that this forum is not right for you. You need to go somewhere where you're hearing unabashed support for the player that you like. You understand that? But just getting back to the point, when Marcellus Wiley starts speaking about Cam Newton, a player who's been done for years, he's always trying to construct these scenarios where Cam Newton's going to make a comeback. Cam Newton been in the NFL for 10, 11 years. He's only had one really great season. The other seasons have ranged from slightly above average to discernibly bad. So there's no precedent for Cam Newton ever being a great quarterback. He had one season where he was a great overall NFL player. He's never been accurate. So, when Marcellus makes these arguments that are frivolous and don't really have any empirical data to substantiate them, that's how you know that he's fanboying out. My whole thing is, do you have analytics or stats to back up what you're saying? That's how appropriate arguments are constructed.
There'll be a debate there.
Most
I will
player
give you
ever,
KD first, but after that, it's Giannis Antetokounmpo because of what he accomplished this last year.
What about the next two picks?
What
about the next two picks? Brooklyn, right?
I could go. I would go Harden, Drew Holiday, or actually, again, it would be a debate.
Yeah, this guy has an issue with Kyrie. A lot of people have an issue with Kyrie. I get it. Kyrie is not everybody's cup of tea. Kyrie is an example to me of a performer who has to be cast correctly. If he's not cast correctly, he's not going to show or shine appropriately. Unfortunately for him, he's another one of these guys who's caught up trying to be Kobe Bryant rather than Isaiah Thomas. And it is what it is, but you have to take advantage of that. I think that James Harden coming to the team actually helps Kyrie because it allowed him to fall into the role that he always wanted to be in anyway. That being, the guy who can go out there and shoot 25 times and score 30 points a game. It would not surprise me to see Kyrie average 30 points per game next year, by the way. I could see the Nets having two guys average over 30 PPG per game next year. With KD and Kyrie, and with James Harden averaging probably somewhere around 21, 22 points per game and somewhere around 12 assists per game. That would not surprise me at all.
This is what it comes back to.
Kyrie Irving?
Yes, I am. Oh, yes, I am. Did you see what Drew Holiday did for Team USA?
Now, come on now, bruh. We're talking about what Drew Holiday did for Team USA. Really. And I love Drew Holiday. He surprised me in being able to be the starting point guard on a championship team because I've always had discussions about Drew Holiday where I've stated, in my view, he would be a spectacular third guard on a championship team. I never thought that he'd be able to be the starting point guard on a championship team. So he proved me wrong this year, even though in my view this was an anomalous season to a degree. But to compare him to Kyrie Irving, if Kyrie Irving puts up an effort on defense, which he was doing over the course of this season, it's not even close between him and Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday almost single-handedly cost the Milwaukee Bucks a couple of games in the playoffs this year, shooting 4 for 21 and 5 for 23 and a lot of these other wild offensive outings. I did a video regarding Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and, Scottie Pippen's offensive impact in the playoffs and how he was historically bad in 1996 and 1998. Drew Holiday was also historically bad offensively in 2021. Like, the defensive impact that he had was phenomenal, but when you factor in how bad he often was on offense, that does not average out to a player who would have the impact of a Kyrie Irving if Kyrie chose to play defense, which he's done over the course of this season into the playoffs.
It's not about the numbers. Sometimes it's not about the talent. It's about a guy who makes other guys better.
Have you seen Kyrie in the finals?
Drew Holiday makes other guys better.
Well, Kyrie
Irving benefits from other guys.
Right, but here's the thing. That's a better argument if Kyrie's your point guard. Like, I get messages from Boston Celtics dudes who are still mad at Kyrie for his 2 years in Boston. That whole situation imploded, due to being strategically sabotaged by the mainstream media after Kyrie got there, because the mainstream sports media was upset with Kyrie for leaving LeBron. So after Kyrie got hurt, after his first season there, the mainstream liberal sports media, was trying to get into the subconscious minds of those young players with the Boston Celtics, and it worked, in tandem with the fact that Kyrie is just not a natural point guard. But he's not playing point guard on the Brooklyn Nets. So it's not really about how much he makes other players better with the Nets. But if you closely watch the Nets, he has made other players better. He has moved the ball better than he ever has. And that's the reason why his shooting percentage has gone up this year. And I believe that I addressed this when referencing the statements made by George Karl in regards to Carmelo Anthony. When George Karl, refuted a lot of Carmelo's points about wanting to win a championship, George said that Carmelo was more focused on scoring. And I think that George's overall point was, had Carmelo moved the ball more and passed the ball more, he could have averaged the same 25, 26 points per game, but his shooting percentage would have been higher because it would have been harder for the defense to scheme against him. When you gave Carmelo the ball in certain positions on the floor, you already knew what he was going to do, which was try to shoot by hook or by crook. But when you move the basketball, you reverse the basketball, you move without the ball, you can get 25, 26 points per game, but you'll be shooting 51, 52% from the field. That's why Stephen Curry's shooting percentage is higher than Dame Lillard's. He moves the basketball and he moves without the ball. So he gets easier shots than Dame gets because Dame wants to go one-on-one all the time or one-on-two.
That holds Kyrie Irving's resume up there is the fact that he won a ring with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and he also happened to be with LeBron James.
Right, but he didn't just win a ring. Like, Rick Bucher's talking like Kyrie Irving was Iman Shumpert or something like that. Like, Kyrie Irving had a 40-point game in those finals. He hit the game-winning shot in Game 7. He wasn't just a guy who won a ring.
Since then, the numbers look good. The accomplishments, not so much. So, yes, I would take Jrue Holiday over Kyrie Irving based on what I'm building as a team and what he's done. And this is the thing you can't argue with, Marcellus.
I'm arguing.
Those three, they proved it. They won a ring.
Well, I would agree with that because that's factual, but really what they proved is that they could win a championship in a year that they had to. Like, they had to win a championship this year. This was their opening. If the Milwaukee Bucks did not win it this year, they would probably never get a championship, and Giannis understood that, which is why he did certain things over the course of the playoffs.
3 guys with the Nets. KD won one with Golden State. Kyrie won one with Cleveland. James Harden has never won one. So the idea that those 3 can come together and be a championship trio simply has not been proved, and the Bucks have. So whatever you want to say about talent or anything else, I got the 3 that have demonstrated that they can do ultimately what I want them to do, and the other 3 have yet to do that.
Thank God that Kevin Durant had that big toe, or we were having a different conversation. Otto, you can't keep giving me the negative example.
Now, a lot of people hate when some of the quote-unquote supporters of the Brooklyn Nets and their big 3 bring up the events that transpired at the end of Game 7 with Kevin Durant and how literally, had his foot been 3 inches further back, they would have won that series in 7 games. But when a series is that close, you have to bring up moments like that, especially when you're having comparative conversations or comparative arguments about which team is better. Once again, literally, the last half of the series, it was KD against the whole Milwaukee Bucks team. And he almost won 2 games by himself. So if you bring back Kyrie Irving and James Harden, and they don't have almost season-ending injuries, I just don't see how the Milwaukee Bucks have a real chance. And why they're trying to make these arguments as if they do have a realistic chance. Now, if the Nets come back next season and they have the same injury issues, which would honestly be historic for a super team to have a massive amount of injury issues in back-to-back seasons like that, then I have to bow out of the conversation. But I just cannot assume that they're going to have the same problem next year again. But we'll see.
I only want to focus in on injury and being present. How about just being better? Like, the negatives for the Brooklyn Nets is just they get hurt. And then y'all just talk about some other issues why they're not present. But they're just better. It's not even a conversation. 4 picks, 3 of them guaranteed to go 1, 2, I'm saying, and 3, Brooklyn. But I'm respecting y'all saying 4 picks. But 3 of the 4 are Brooklyn. You're not even weaving. We're not even snaking this. This is crazy. And then
And to Marcellus's point, I've always stated, and most people understand this, if you want to figure out who's going to win a series in the NBA, it's basically about which team has 2 of the top 3 players or 3 of the top 5 players. And that's normally who's going to win a series in the NBA, unless the other team just has a player who's of such a high caliber that he's able to overcome or supersede the contribution of the other team's top 2 players. So, you know, for example, when the Cleveland Cavaliers played against Golden State, when Golden State had Steph and KD, LeBron was never going to defeat them because he was going up against 2 other superstar level players. Even with Kyrie on his side, because the system that the Cleveland Cavaliers ran was never going to be able to go against the system that the Golden State Warriors ran. KD and LeBron offset each other. They're both equal. And I've always said this, unfortunately, the media has not publicized LeBron and KD as this generation's Magic and Bird. Instead, they try to act like LeBron was head and shoulders above everyone, and all these guys were scrambling up the rocks to try to, equal out with him. When the fact of the matter is, no, that's not the case. But, it is what it is. The point being is, Marcellus does have to acquiesce. He has to acknowledge that Kyrie Irving is not a better overall player than Giannis. That's silly. When you factor in offense, defense, rebounding, come on, man.
With that slick talk, because I love them. But organizations left in a cloud of controversy. You don't want to have a player on your roster like that. Well, I would have wanted Shaquille O'Neal when he left Orlando, and they were left in a little bit of controversy. I would have wanted LeBron when he left Cleveland the first time, and they were left in a little bit of controversy. Hey, I would have took Kawhi after San Antonio, and look what he did with the Raptors. And they
great points all three times. But that was a ludicrous attempt at a counterpoint by Rick Bucher. That you wouldn't want James Harden, KD, and Kyrie Irving. Get the fuck out of here. You know damn well if you're a GM on any franchise in the NBA and those guys are available and want to play together, you're making the call, because if you're not, your owner's going to fire you.
Out of controversy. Man, y'all cooking these books up here. Let me not cook books. Only 3 players in the league on the same team average over 24 points a game. They're all on the Brooklyn Nets. Only one team could say that. Nets, best field goal percentage last year. Nets, second best in 3-pointers. Y'all gave me an argument about, where's their library card? Or are they donating it?
All the Nets are missing really is some rebounding. They need rebounding and interior defensive help. I mean, if the Nets had someone like a Nerlens Noel or someone like that, I mean, there wouldn't be any team that could beat them, because offensively they'd just be bringing too much to the table.
Do they like hanging out with kids? What the hell y'all talking about? We're talking about basketball. You see those 3 right there? Those 3, if they stay healthy, it's a sweep. If they don't stay healthy, he's still up 2-0 with 1 in the third.
If they stay healthy, if California didn't have earthquakes,
is not that bad,
Nigeria was flourishing,
Everything ain't that bad.
if here's what it is,
a big
Smith.
one every now and then.
If Marcellus was more team-minded, he would understand our take. But Sel got a track mindset. And Sel is like, just give me the best individuals and thinks that will correlate to the best team. What we know.
I understand what you're saying, Acho, but that's the coach's job. And that's my issue with the Nets. To me, that's their biggest variable. It's not the players, it's the damn coach, Steve Nash, who showed me nothing last season as a head coach. Only thing he did to me was stand there on the sidelines with a pensive look on his face, act like he was some type of chess master, while the players ran everything out there on the floor. So, to me, the clock is ticking on him.
Just recently have seen is the best individuals do not always correlate to the best team, but what do the individuals contribute to the team?
I understand your train of thought. Didn't they just play each other? And when they weren't even healthy from hello.
Hold on. Acho's making a great point.
How is that? That's not a great point.
Acho's making a great point.
Oh.
The Toronto Raptors, talent-wise, were they better than the Golden State Warriors?
No, sir.
Yes, they were. By the finals, they absolutely were better than the Golden State Warriors and had more talent. If you're going to tell me that the Golden State Warriors are going to face a team led by Kawhi Leonard with Kyle Lowry, Pascal Siakam, Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, with that light-skinned brother with the beard coming off the bench, and the Golden State Warriors have no KD, I'm sorry, but the Toronto Raptors have the more talented team, and the more talented team discernibly. It's not even that close. You needed KD to try to offset Kawhi, because Kyle Lowry and Stephen Curry, of course, you're going to give the edge to Steph, but it's not going to be that huge of an edge because of the level of defense that Toronto plays. You also have Klay Thompson, who's phenomenal in clutch moments, but you would expect there to be a bit of an offset between him and Pascal Siakam because of the level of defense that Pascal plays. But no, the Toronto Raptors had the more talented team as long as Golden State had no KD. Now, when you bring back in KD, now, that's a whole different situation, because now it's 2 superstars against 1.
Mavericks, when they beat the Miami Heat in the Big 3, were they more talented?
No, sir.
Than the Miami Heat?
Keep on sit.
No, they were not more talented than Miami, but the reason why Miami lost that series is because the alleged greatest basketball player ever had the worst meltdown in finals history. Like, you kind of making Marcellus's point, but I'm not quite sure if Marcellus understands that you're making his point.
I mean, I could go. When you put Steve Nash and Dwight Howard and Pau Gasol together, and Kobe Bryant.
Right, but all those guys were old by then. You can't compare that to what we see with the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets are actually in their prime. So, a lot of the examples that you're bringing up, Slick Rick, show me that you're either being disingenuous or you're being obtuse. Because Steve Nash, by the time that he got with the Lakers, keep in mind, that was the 2012-2013 season. Steve Nash was drafted in 1996. And when he was drafted, he was 21, 22 years old. He was not one of these guys who went to college for 1 year. So by the time he got to the Lakers, he was 38, 39 years old. You can't compare that to this with the Nets. Kyrie's 28, about to be 29 years old.
You have a ton of talent. Did anything happen?
So, I get it.
There,
so you guys are designing teams where you want a team that's not as good, but we're going to stay healthy and we're going to beat the other team because they're going to get hurt. That's how y'all want to draw.
No.
Okay, that's cool.
That's their attempt at a point, but it's really about them just, for whatever reason, not liking the Nets. Let's keep one thing in mind. Bucher has already displayed that he does not like Kyrie. Acho has already taken a couple of personal shots at Kyrie in regards to Kyrie's response to being called the quote-unquote N-word by Schroeder. We know that Acho does not like KD because he views KD as a rival of LeBron's. So a lot of these arguments that they're crafting are based on a personal distaste or, some level of animus that they might have for these players. I'm not saying that they hate those guys, but, they're speaking like educated fanboys. They're trying to substantiate arguments based on what they want to be true as opposed to what's obvious. Once again, if Brooklyn they do not suffer any calamitous injuries, and we can say that about every team, not just them. If they don't suffer any calamitous injuries, they should be in the finals next year, as long as they can get a player who will man the paint defensively for them and get rebounds. Like, it's just not that difficult to figure out.
I love to play out. Well, y'all did.
I don't want just talent. I want talent that works together.
Oh, yeah, we got a dynasty coming. It's coming. It's right in front of you. Coming up.
But anyway, that's basically it on that, brothers. We'll see how things go next season. Whether or not I would take the big three of the Nets or of the Milwaukee Bucks is not even close. I do think that, once again, kudos to the Bucks. They did what they were supposed to do this season. There are little niches in, the NBA timelines where you have to take advantage of those gaps and win the chip when it's available for you to win, especially when you know that there are other teams that are built to win championships that year.